Welcome back to the Land Bulletin podcast, where every other week we bring you experts in the field to impart their knowledge when it comes to the ranch and sporting property market, buying and selling advice, the latest best stewardship practices, as well as topics that impact landowners every day. I'm your host, Haley Mirr. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Land Bulletin. I'm Haley Mirr, and today we have a special episode. This year marks our 20th anniversary as a company, so what better way to look back at it than having a conversation with two people that were here from the beginning. So welcome Ken Mirr and Jeff Hubbard to the show. I appreciate you taking the time to be on today.
Yeah, thanks. You brought the two old dudes in.
Yeah,
I know
you did.
I know you both have a lot going on right now, so it's kind of like, oh, good, a Friday. Why not? Let's add this to the mix. So thanks for being on.
Thanks for having us.
Real good times. Come on.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, so I kind of wanted to start. I mean, I've also been here from the beginning, but from a different perspective. Ken, we'll start with you. Can you take us back to when Mirr Ranch Group started? What inspired you to create the business? And then how did you kind of integrate the first brokers into the business?
So that goes back to 2005. I as I tell people, I was a Russian studies major that went to law school because I couldn't find another thing to do and ended up, being an attorney and then becoming public lands. But really, in 1999 is when I committed to doing brokerage. So I worked with another company from 1995 to 1999, excuse me, to 2005. So at that point, I had enough experience of, brokering and living, and eating what you kill, so to speak. But living on brokerage and understanding it. And I had enough clients around me that were very supportive of the idea of kind of creating a separate company based on some of the principles and the freedom and flexibility to do what we wanted to do. It wasn't that I was having a difficult time with the other firm. It was more about, just being entrepreneurial and just, wanting to do what you wanted to do. And part of it was a commitment to, things that were important to me at that time. So anyways, I had a lot of, like I said, clients saying, hey, you should really start your own. You're good at this, whatever, So I just remember, getting buying a software for how to write a business plan and just noodled on it and figured out how to start it, right? And had some advice from people. My dad was an entrepreneur and he did things. But anyways, one thing led to another. And I just remember in 2005, just saying, okay, this is the time to do it. Things are going well. I think that decision was made. I think we finally not incorporated, but we filed LLC and records and stuff in 2005. And I can let Jeff, I met through one of, a friend of mine, Dudley Mitchell. I think that's how we met Jeff initially, right?
Yeah, it was Dudley. That's right.
That was 2005. I mean, did I talk to you before then?
I don't think so. So, little backstory on that. Dudley is one of our seed investors. So I graduated college in 95 and told my dad I wanted to be an elk hunting guide. And I graduated from Vanderbilt. He's like, so you went to Vanderbilt so you could be an elk hunting guide, huh? And I said, yeah. He said, that's cool. As long as I'm not sending you any money, do what as long as you're working, you do you, And so I did it, figured I would do it for a year and then get serious. And ended up doing it for 5 years and starting an outfitting and guiding enterprise and, worked in Texas, New Mexico, and Colorado. And got married in 97 and figured, I wanted to have a conventional family life. So I decided to go back and get a graduate degree, which took me back to Nashville and finished that in a couple of years and worked in the commercial real estate business as an office broker. I was leasing office space and selling office buildings, and I actually enjoyed it. We had a good life in Nashville. And one of my clients was Dudley Mitchell, and we got to be friends. And he said, "Man, with your background between brokerage and hunting, I got a friend that's starting this ranch brokerage company, and you ought to talk to him." And so I did, and flew out to Denver and we sat down and Ken and I hit it off, and that was probably in the spring of '05. And we, did some soul searching with my wife and decided to take the plunge and move from Nashville to Denver in November of '05 and started starting this business with Ken. We had Tommy Latusik as well at the time, who's still a great friend, and he's doing other stuff now. But yeah, Ken brought me in as a junior guy and put me on a bunch of listings and taught me the business, and it's been a great career.
And what were I know you guys are working, I know what you're working on now, but what was the market like? What were some of the early listings that you guys were working on? Were they a little bit different than, the Dawsons and the monasteries of the world?
Yeah. Well, you know, we do just about anything, right? To earn a living in some respect. But
Well,
y-
it's funny.
yeah.
I remember having a conversation with Ken. I mean, when we first started out, the way we marketed these things was through these magazines. And I mean, we had a website, but I remember having a conversation with Ken. Boy, I think this internet's going to be the way this stuff's going to go. And he said, "Yeah, I think you're right." And I said, But it's amazing. I mean, we started, everything was Rocky Mountain Farm and Ranch. I mean, that was how we had brochures and direct mail and all of that, and the old good old smiling and dialing. We used to do that, and still do it. But um, yeah, it's amazing how it's evolved over the years.
Two-sided brochures, front and back kind of thing. There wasn't as much, I would say competition. It was just early days of some of that ranch brokerage where, we were competing with, gentlemen and women and gentlemen, people who were really ag background. I mean, these were people who also helped sell cows. I mean, they were a full kind of service, for, some of the property owners, and it was just a different time then. There weren't, resort brokers trying to sell ranches or things of that nature. It was a really a very still is a very specialized business, but yeah, some of these folks who I'd met from my days, practicing law or doing public lands, and you just knew of them long enough to have an opportunity to represent them. But Jeff's funny. We were talking about the internet back in that day. It was so you create a website, but it was so difficult to modify that we were paying so much that there was no WordPress back in the day. And every time we had to make an amendment to the website, it was a big deal, right? And it took a while. You're a prisoner somewhat by what you had up on the website. And I remember even thinking about legacy properties and or legacy ranches and fine sporting properties, just coming up with that terminology. Uh, Looking at Gray's Sporting Journal when they used to talk about fine sporting properties, like, oh, I love that terminology and legacy ranches. I mean, I was influenced by those things and saying that's kind of what we'd like to, these are these ideas, and they still are general kind of motivating philosophy for what we try to do today. But coming up with those, bylines and things like that, those were the things that we spent time on, right?
Oh, Ken, yeah, man, you grinded and grinded over that stuff, and uh,
That terminology.
yeah, oh yeah. Uh, but it worked out, and I was lucky to be a part of the nascent stages of the
Well, even the
company.
name, I was gonna call it some Western ranch thing,
Yeah,
whatever. I had no idea, but when I worked with Terry Barnhart, who was ran an advertising agency, and his wife Carly helped do our design work, but he said, "No, you need something to remember. Some of this stuff's all gonna get collectively just there's gonna be so many ranch names that you just won't even know what the heck it is." And I just looked around at the commercial space and saw like Cushman and Wakefield and these old names, even Fuller, and I thought, "Oh, they all have their names on it," so you kinda remember it versus, like I said, commercial real estate, blah, 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 you just don't, and that's kinda
Doesn't
how
stick.
we did that.
Yeah. Well, it's just so interesting how even, the inspiration you got for verbiage then and where it's gone now and how we rely on data to kind of inform how we talk about certain ranches and how we do our SEO. It's just even that aspect has changed so much from when you guys started to where it is today. So it's just interesting to watch that kind of growth. You were saying the market space was a little different, especially with the kind of brokerages that were out there. What were the landscapes like? Was it as you know, our bread and butter are these like $5 million ranches, but back then you could get some big ranches for not, that much money. What was it like from that perspective back in 2005?
I think Jeff and I were, when $2 million was a big deal, million and a half, whatever, and then you get to five, and we all had those things. Oh, then you had a $10 million deal, and I remember the first 20, things of that nature, and what you realize, at least what I realized, that they it's the same process, somewhat a different buying pool, and they have more zeros. That was always my kind of thing. It wasn't really any. You just had to accept that. You didn't get so enamored with, oh my gosh, I'm working on this. I'm enamored by the landscapes more than I am the number. Sometimes, is uh, uh, the size of the transactions and the properties that you're working on. That's what kind of motivates you. But yeah, we were, like I said, we weren't taking everything. We were still abiding by that legacy ranches and vice border properties, but we were trying to find kind of unique properties and vet them. We were still vetting
Mhm.
and saying, is this something we, remember, Jeff, we'd still sit there and going, is this something we really want to do? Even at the beginning days, we didn't just take everything or anything. Landscapes have changed. And you were saying about, Rocky Mountain Farm and Ranch, and the only other periodical was like the Western Livestock Journal magazine,
Yeah.
right? Properties. That was
Yep.
it.
Yeah, and the demographic of the sellers has changed. It's
Mhm.
really evolved. I mean, when I started 20 years ago, a lot of these quote unquote trophy properties for which the kind of the highest value use is, recreation, fishing, hunting. I mean, they're all production properties, but most of the sellers back then were producers. I mean, these were cattlemen and guys that were eking out a living, making $60,000 a year on a ranch that's worth $10 million. So it was an interesting experience. And that, unfortunately, a lot of that's gone. Those are kind of the good old days, and it was challenging because a lot of these people were born and raised on these properties, and in their 70s and 80s, and there's a lot of emotion that would go hand in hand with unloading these places. And yeah, I mean, he goes from making 60 grand a year to sticking $10 million in his pocket, but then it's like, what do you do now? You go sit on a beach in Hawaii, or yeah, I can do that, but I'd rather sit here and punch cows until I'm dead. So
That's
we
John. That was John.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was John.
And we had quite a few like that. I mean,
Yeah.
and the buyers, and I'm a capitalist. Great. I mean, buyers tended to be wealthy people who wanted a playground, and as they do now. And, but it was interesting to experience that sort of shift in the
That's a
market.
good point. That's the shift. You're right. There were a lot more producers, or really old
Owner
traditional,
producers. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, ranch owners. That were in oil and gas or something, right? Those were kind of one reason or another. You think of the giant from the book in Texas, right? They were old traditional like ranchers, or had a lot of money too. They were like, because they have oil and gas interests, but boy, once you hit in the 2000s, the selling group, what happened was they were just selling to more high net worth individuals, and now what happens? So much of who we represent have become the high net worth individuals who are now have owned it for 20 years and now are reselling and putting back on the market. And,
Mhm.
and so you're right. The buyers and sellers have changed, and I think what I've learned too is that the amount of wealth that's been created worldwide has dramatically increased since early 2000s to even 2005 to the present day, and you're just you see it, right? I laugh, like, I grew up in a blue collar area of Northwest Indiana, and owning your own auto body and paint shop was a big deal back then. And how you get around some of these folks that have this wealth, and so they can purchase it, but they also demand then from you. These deals demand a degree of understanding of what you're selling and what
Mhm.
you're marketing.
And I would say, another thing that's changed a lot is the availability of data from like water rights to assessor information to, accessing these documents. And I think, the fact that you guys back in the day, I was, talking about my first memories of you doing this job, Dad. And it was all about, you had reams of maps in the basement and you had assessor records that you had printed out, and you still to this day print everything out and it drives me crazy. But because you guys had to do all of that, I mean, the market and the system way more than some of these younger guys who have relied, on some of this data just to like access it that easily. So it's, and in some cases, you struggle with some of those online things, Ken. I know you specifically, but the fact that you know all
You
of
mean
this
apps?
already.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how to get that, I mean, it's that even has changed since 2005, especially because I think this industry in particular, the ranching kind of world, that data was kind of the last frontier for a lot of this, like the assessor sites, like the internet came on the scene, all these things changed, but some of that stuff took a little bit longer to get.
I'll never forget Ken and I both. We would divide and conquer and go sit down in the courthouses, and pull out the assessors' uh, maps and plat maps, and there were it was such a fragmented, inefficient space at that time because none of this stuff was digitized. I mean, there's no telling how many courthouses I've been in, and it changed pretty quickly. But I mean, especially the first 2 or 3 years. I remember sitting in Albany County Courthouse in Laramie, Wyoming, and man, it was right when I started, and I liked that area because it was a great elk hunting area, and I just loved it, man. I was just sitting there looking at these maps and these landowners and trying to figure out which tracks were cool and which ones would be great elk hunting, places, and just you didn't even phones. You didn't even take pictures of the stuff with your phone back then. You paid to have copies made of the owners' names and the maps and so forth, and I just loved it. And reaching out to those people and dealing with them, and it was just I really got a charge out of it. I know I was in the right spot, but yeah, it was very different back then. Now you just go to Land ID and it's all at your fingertips.
And we buy donuts for, Betty Joe down at the assessor,
Cafe, yeah.
right? We bring them in. "Hi, ladies, I'm here again today." And you pull out and you copy these, and the funny thing is those plat maps would just have schedule numbers on them. They wouldn't have names. So then you have to go to the second process of taking those schedule numbers and applying the names to them. But they were those are what you saw, what I had originally were those big plat map, because I would write the names of people in those things and you kind of keep track of them. But you could also see it taught me how to look at a map and see what you wanted to see. You could tell quickly, oh, that's a good property because you could match visually. We didn't have, you know, the Forest Service maps that we used as exhibits. We used to have like tape, and we'd have X-Acto knives and we border in, and that's how we did our maps and things like that. That was the marketing department back then.
Yeah, was there a marketing department back then? Just out of curiosity. I know
Yeah.
it was like a little
We
combo.
had
And
people doing it for us. Yeah. Yeah, we actually had we had some folks would help do that for us. It wasn't in-house at the time.
You were outsourcing.
That's
Okay,
the
well,
way.
I'd love to know, now things are a well-oiled machine, but I know there were times where this wasn't the easiest job to have, especially growing up in it as a kid. But, 2008, I know that was a really hard time. We thought that same thing would happen during COVID, and the exact opposite did. But can you guys tell me a couple of moments throughout the 20 years where this was kind of a harder profession and people weren't really looking at ranches. I'll start with you, Jeff.
Yeah, obviously we had the mortgage crisis in 2007, 2008, and the residential real estate market fell apart big time. We didn't see, we maybe saw a tiny correction in our space. And it speaks to the sort of the muscular nature of what we do, of land. It just doesn't get hit like other spaces generally. And so we slogged through and survived that. It did slow down a little bit, but came roaring back. And then, of course, in 2012, we had another recession, and our space held up beautifully then. And of course, COVID, it was the Momo days of COVID were just wild. Yeah, I would actually say the slowest in my 20 years that I've experienced would be the post-COVID kind of hangover. Because we had this weird situation where we had a ton of absorption during COVID. Everyone wanted a ranch, of course, get away from everybody. And so we had, when COVID basically went away, we had this weird scenario where we had very low inventory, but also very low demand. And we're pulling out of that now, but the market's improving by all accounts. But yeah, it's interesting. I think the takeaway is that, ranches, land, farms, are just pretty steady,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember, I just remember though, at that period of time, I think I had all kids in private schools, and I was like, okay, how am I paying for this? Uh, and you can't put a gun to head to somebody saying you got to buy a ranch, right? At the time, if you think about residential, people move and take new jobs and things like that as they grow their family. They have a need, right? They got to buy commercial real estate, right? A company expands, they move to another place. There's a demand. Other than producers wanting to expand, why, do you have to buy a ranch, right? Do you have to buy a recreational property? No, you don't necessarily. But there is that attractiveness to it, like you said, the hedge against a lot of different things. And you had the early pioneers of folks like Ted Turner or you know, John, yeah, yeah, all those buying properties. And everybody started saying, well, maybe that is a good idea. Maybe what's with this? And that's, eventually led to like Land Report during the Land Report 100. And then people saying, oh, land is a good. And, to this day, the funny thing about all this is even as an investment, I just look at land and ownership of land in the United States as being a very unique opportunity just globally. When you look at a lot of other countries where you have a difficulty and lack of security in that investment, where it's so secure here. So, that's why we attract international people too. But for the most part, most of our clients are all kind of US based, but I was worried. I remember even in some of those days when because in 2005, we were starting to get a nice trajectory, right? Things were happening, and then '08 hit, '07, '08. I remember hearing it on the radio. I was up in Winter Park. I'll never forget hearing that when the market collapsed. I was like at a McDonald's in, Winter Park after looking at a deal. Yeah, I just remember certain things like that. But, and then we had to look at fixed costs and just making sure that we could get through this. And that's when those things, like even when my dad starting a company back in the 60s and 70s, and when they had to go through things, you remember those conversations when they had to get through them, those recessions that were really big. Even when I went to college, I remember recessions in the 70s that were really terrible. And you just know,
70s,
y- y-
college.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you're showing
Well,
your age.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I would say though, to both of your points, it's I think it has always been this really nice investment that people feel good about. And what's been interesting is you guys have been a part of kind of this transition of wealth and ownership. Like Jeff was saying, from these operators that sold to these ultra high net worth, and then these ultra high net worth who are getting to that point where they're looking to sell too. So it's kind of been this interesting trajectory to kind of watch this transfer of wealth happen too, and people recognizing how good of an investment land has become. And that brings up a point. I'd love to know, beyond just the big deals, and let's talk about those too, but what are some key milestones that you guys have both had throughout your career here at Mirr Ranch Group?
You know what I just recall back in the day is we thought fly fishing properties at first were the big deal, and then you learn that the hunting ranches, in order to control the habitat, we had to start expanding into. And that's where you guys kind of led that charge. Like I said, you live in Colorado, you think of these fly fishing streams and stuff like that as being like, but they're small in comparison to the level of habitat involved because, we're not like Texas, where we can have these fenced in, game preserves. It's the the wildlife republic here,
Mhm.
and knowing that they're going to move from place to place and Forest Service to Forest Service, and property to property. I just remember, seeing that and realizing having an aha moment with you all focused as well and heavily as you are on those, projects that it just started to expand. Some of those things were up in, even Wyoming, doing some of those transactions. Remember up at Sheridan and hitting some of those up there
I'm looking
and
at
working.
I have a cheat sheet. That Muddy Creek Ranch was one of your bigger ones at the beginning.
Yeah, that was a great
Near
ranch. Does it, how big, I mean, it wasn't that big,
That
but
was
man, nice place.
3,700 acres, but that was one of your bigger kinda, like, sale prices up near Buffalo.
What was the price on that?
That
Do you
one
have,
was it was 675.
yeah, that place is probably worth $25 million now. I mean, it's
Right, right. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
we I loved that ranch. It was, on Muddy Creek, Crazy Woman Creek, just a little west of Buffalo, uh, and, that was a nice deal. We did that together, Ken, I think, didn't we? And, we had a lot of kinda base hit places like that when yeah, Ken and I have both had some really monster, thank goodness, deals over the years. I think about Caribou Ranch, up in, Nederland area, 6-shooter ranch in Mitchell, Oregon, just east of Bend, Oregon. That was a big one. That was about 40,000 acres, I think, 25 million if I'm remembering right. Um, and then, the Ken, you wanna talk about J.E. Canyon? What a great one that was.
Yeah, those are yeah, once you got I think Trees Ranch, I was in Utah. I always thought Utah landscapes were interesting and neat, and we worked on the Thunder Ranch together, Jeff, too, which was that was an interesting deal. It was when we started breaking into Utah, and that Thunder was right there off of the green, right when it came uh, out of the national, park, um, and it was a heavily irrigated place. L I shot my first elk out there.
Yeah, we were together. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I ended up, I was kind of a selective snob about this side, and there's elk. This really interesting place. It's, I don't know, 1,000 acres of the most beautiful alfalfa you've ever seen, surrounded by a big swamp and, in a big bend in the Green River. And I mean, there was 300 head of elk on this thing that never left, and quality elk as well. And the owner, was nice enough to let me hunt. And I I was looking at a bull, and he's pretty big, and I thought, "Hmm, this is the same afternoon Ken killed his. Oh, man, do I wanna shoot that thing?" And I decided not to shoot it, and then next day, another guy shot it. It was bigger than I thought, so, sort of, I'll never forget, that was a mistake.
Yeah.
But, no, yeah, that's a good, I'd forgotten Thunder. That's a great point. That was a fun one to do. Ken and I had spent a lot of time out there, uh, and that was a very interesting place. And when you were talking about that, I thought about, Fish Lake Ranch, which we
Spider
sold.
Bowl.
Yeah, we sold that. That was in central Utah. Another just awesome property. I mean, one of the best places I've ever been involved with. not huge. I don't know if you have the specs on that one
I
handy,
do.
Haley.
That one was 8,000 acres, but that might
Yeah.
have just been deeded.
Yeah. I mean, so big enough. What, and do you remember, do you have what it sold for?
Sold for 7.5.
Oh my God. Yeah. That place would trade for 30 million now, probably. Maybe I don't know if the owner's going to watch this or not, but did well.
Maybe we should just go through all the old ones and then
Yeah,
send it to
exactly.
those owners.
Yeah.
Well, that was a reflection of a little bit of Utah too. That was like a hole in the donut. It was private land in the midst of a big national forest area. I mean, and some places in the United States you can't find that, and that's where you could see some of those places, these landscapes. If you look at a map, I always tell people look at public land maps to understand what they're buying into and understanding that. But that was private, all surrounded by public. And they had those opportunities because of the hunting units out there and how they have that, not ranching for wildlife, but CWMU, so you can get other tags. So, those are things when you start learning about state laws matter, the type of hunting that they offer and the unique licensing opportunities. And then Utah just really has those kind of unique opportunities. I even sold one of the big things for me was like the Trees Ranch when we first sold that. And that was only like 2,200 acres, but it was essentially adjacent to it is adjacent to a national park. And it had parts of the Virgin River flowing through it. It had a 40-acre lake. It was next to a wilderness area. It was just, it was ideal. And in that situation, you're looking at local comps, but then you're looking at national comps. And this is where you start broadening your search. What is a comp and things like that, and saying, well, what trades next to a national park, and what does that look like, and what do those values look like? And that was a kind of an aha moment for me too. That was one of my first kind of, bigger scale, 20 plus million, but it was a gem. I mean, it still is. It's one of those unique properties that you hopefully you have an influence on its stewardship, but if you can, and then that was and just even dealing with the clientele, and who bought it and things like that. So.
Well, I mean, you guys have worked on a lot of cool landscapes and met a lot of interesting people along the way. What is your vision for the next 20 years of Mirr Ranch Group, or the market in general? I mean, where do you see the path that you guys have already taken going down the road? We've already talked about transfer of wealth. We've talked about how the landscape has changed just from buyers and sellers and who's buying these things. Where do you kind of see it without a crystal ball and kind of projecting, numbers? Where do you kind of see this headed?
Go for it.
I know it's a big
Well,
question.
yeah. I mean, I think, I don't think this company's going anywhere but up, onwards and upwards. And I think we've got great people and we do a great job for our clients. And with respect to the market in general, I kind of, I touched on it before. I just think this space is kind of steady, and we're not, in terms of valuation on these places, you don't have the peaks and troughs. It's not lumpy. It's just, there are no hockey sticks. It's just a good, safe, strong space. I mean, when you look at the average annual appreciation in ag land, over the last 50 years, it's something like 6 to 7%. And, it's not liquid. It can't really compete with the stock market in that way, but it's not, considering the risk profile, risk reward, it's a pretty attractive deal. And I think that, I think we're gonna, I don't think we're gonna see any problems in our space, hopefully, in our career for the short balance of our careers, Ken. Hopefully long balance, but, no, I'm very bullish on ranches and land, and, still love doing what I do. I love the people. I love the land. I love the animals on the land and the culture of this part of the world. I think it's just a very, neat and attractive thing for buyers.
Yeah, I think, they keep talking about, aging population, of landowners, but just aging population in the United States with wealth. So there's a wealth transfer. And I just also see there's a kind of this new reallocation of land. I mean, it goes with it as well. You think back in the homesteading and people were homesteading coming out and the great surge of people coming out. But I just see now, with areas of Colorado where the values have gone so far up that the fourth generation, fifth generation rancher saying, I don't know if I want to continue to compete with this. And they're also saying, wow, I could liquidate. And what's happening though, they may be liquidating here in the mountains, of Colorado or any area that's heavily influenced by resort markets, and then moving to another area where they can continue to do what they do. And so we're seeing that transition, but we're also seeing a transition with different kind of management. So these ranches still actually have cows on them, right? When new folks buy them, they're hiring managers or they're hiring local ranchers who are still there in those valleys, who can still sustain themselves and sustain their families on ranching. And they will be their operators, and they'll work with them on leases and some cost sharing arrangements with production of hay. And so it still provides them this livelihood that they can still work and have these traditions in these markets in these areas. And I just see, we continue to see and people who are providing different methods of grazing and there's now even search or research going into what other type of things can be grown that are less resilient, and to drought or more resilient to drought. The water rights issues that we see are going to continue to be issues, especially if you're looking on a Colorado River drainage situation where you got the upper or lower basin states competing. There are all these things that you read about in the newspaper every day. And we still need agriculture too, right? We still need ag in our lives. And so I think you just hopefully the folks that continue to buy these things, I think it's incumbent that they understand what their stewardship obligations are. And that's what I think is fun to be a part of as we work with folks and knowing what they have and how to maintain it. Because in the end, the production that you do on an annual basis is fine, but the value is in the land. It's in the resource, and you got to protect that resource because that's what they have in the end. That's where the value of these properties are. And I think there's that new focus or continue to be that focus because these new buyers don't know what that means. And they're like the new Johnny Appleseeds, I call them. It's fun to have that transfer of knowledge going on too, to these folks. And a lot of them are really actually genuinely interested, in understanding what that means.
Yeah, and it occurred to me, you know, there's this sort of general trend in humanity, I think, in the context of the of where technology is and the reality that, the advances are just extraordinary, and the ways we communicate and the ways we work. Um, it's sometimes it's a little off-putting, the ability. I mean, there's so much about it that's wonderful, but at some point, between AI and everything else, at some point, when are humans just going to be sitting there 24/7 with a helmet on? Whatever they want happens. And it, that being so, I think that people are yearning to get back to the basics. And I don't care how sophisticated that helmet is. It's not going to be trying to call in an elk. It's not going to be sheep hunting in the Rocky Mountains. It's not going to be putting a fly in the water on a beautiful stream. There's no way you can do that other than to actually do it. And a lot of humanity's kind of gotten away from that. And I have a sense that people want to get back to that. So I think that bodes well for for what we do, and
Mhm.
it feels good.
Yeah, I'm sitting right now, Connor Coleman, shout out, Resiliency Lands, but I'm sitting on his ranch right now that he manages, and, we live in the city, we live in Denver, and it's even up here, we're here to feed his horses and be outside, and it's just been nice to be still, and I think people forget that sometimes is that stillness piece, um, and there's no other investment where you can park your money, make an investment, and enjoy it while you do it, you know? You're able to kind of breathe, and I agree, I have friends who have brought up, like, the AI and where how it would interact with our business, and I really other than writing blogs, which it does help with, I don't really see it, technology ever taking the place of what this is, so I love that you said that, Jeff. And I guess just looking back and forward, other than being great dads, what do you want your legacy to be, in this space? I know you guys have done a lot already. You've touched a lot of lives, a lot of landscapes, but what do you want your legacy to be in this industry? I know that's a lofty question for a Friday morning, but
It's just, you're wearing a white hat. You ain't wearing a black hat from the standpoint of what you're trying to do. And so if you can have a positive influence, I think on these landscapes, I have very good friends, as you know, in the conservation arena, who do things. I'm on the board of Colorado Cattlemen's Ag Land Trust, and I've been on a lot of different boards over the years. So I just want to see that hopefully you just look back and as we look on these favorably, I look back on some of the transactions. Some of them I wish I could have done a little more, like to help to ensure some stewardship. You can't, but you're not in control of the lands. But matching these buyers to the landscapes are just a pretty wonderful opportunity to do. So that's how I'll look back at it. As I drive down the highways and stuff, I can go, oh yeah, I was involved in that. Now this is operated as such, or it's protected, or however it's going to be. At least I know I help facilitate that.
Work, there's a lot of dignity in work, and people, whether you're a hedge fund billionaire or on the Wall Street or working at McDonald's, work is, to me, is all about people and being honest, understanding your trade, working hard to be good at it and smart about it, and helping people. I mean, obviously we're compensated accordingly, but honesty and integrity and interacting with folks and teaching them things and helping them make good decisions. I mean, those are, that's like the music of life. And that's what I hope my legacy will be in the business, and continued success, we hope. And I'm going to do it as long as I can. At some point, I'm guessing there'll be physical. I mean, it is sort of a physical job in a lot of ways. There can be, but a lot of time on the road, back problems, knee problems, and all that. But I'm still kicking pretty good. So I
You're
hope we have
52.
a lot of years.
64.
Yeah, but I was elk cutting guy for years, man. Had two
Yeah,
hip
Minish.
replacement on the same side.
Yeah.
No, I'm doing well, but no, I don't ever plan on retiring. I can tell you that, as long as I can do it and do a good job. So
No, it's great.
That's a
And,
good point.
and you guys are spreading your knowledge too right now, which is huge. So that you're working with young Straza, you're working with me, Ken, like it's fun just to kind of learn from you guys and kind of like continue your legacy throughout all of this. It's been really awesome to work with both of you. And just to as a kind of full circle, our vision at Mirr Ranch Group is to be the most trusted advisory partners in ranch real estate. And I think you guys have really set the groundwork for that. And I think this conversation has really brought that to light about how much you guys have done to strengthen your knowledge of this industry and where it is now and why we are the trusted advisory partners in this industry. Because the competition has there's a lot more people now trying to do what you guys do. So to continue that path of just trying to know what we're doing to the best of our knowledge and to be the best out there.
I wouldn't have gone to South America had it not been for some of this, right? And getting to, um, see the places that you get to see, to meet the people that you get to do, to learn the things that you get to learn. I mean, I'm still learning too. Geez, I mean, we're working on
Never
a
did you
project
ever
right
think
now.
did you ever
Yeah,
think you would be working with monks on their transfer
right?
of ownership?
The thing about that too is, I ask them about the landscape, how they take care of it, but I ask them, how did you commit to being a monk? I really wanted to know, right? It's fabulous to have those, it's funny when working on that though, there's I remember going to hike up there for years ago, and I always go by the monastery and go, wow, what a fabulous place and how unique and then to be able to work with them, and then, you're looking at the landscape, but you're also realizing these are people in the monastery and how I do right by them, and how they can take this resource and fight for their rights too. But I just the curiosity doesn't stop. I mean, seriously, I have conversations with them about how did you become a monk, and I'm really interested in who they are beyond and then seeing what they've done. But I think it's true with any of the old families and even the newer generation that owns. There's a reason why they buy these things, and understanding that. Um, that's just part of it, as part of it. But the legal aspect still, I'm still fascinated. Like we're working with a gentleman right now, right? Who might not have the money to buy something, but he would love to raise funds to maybe have funding to purchase portion of it through federal and state. And now we got to worry about a little bit, right? We're talking about some of our issues right now. Where's the funding coming through? You got a new administration. Those things don't stop. And you have to be smart enough to identify where those issues are as you work on projects. They can get very complicated, and just knowing that process is really important. And that's the thing.
Isn't AI going to take care of all that?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. You
No,
should just be able to
Well,
plug it in and be like, "How do
all
I
you
handle
lawyers
this?"
out there better start looking for a new job.
I found one. Thank you. Yeah.
NVIDIA. Awesome. Well, I am just excited to see all of the different projects that you guys work on, the landscapes that you work on, the people you meet along the way. And I really see the next 10 years being even more successful, especially seeing the trajectory you both have gone down. So uh, thanks for letting me learn from you today and every day. And I look forward to the next 20 years.
Thank you, Haley. Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
thanks, Nick.
Great being with you guys.
Thanks, Hub.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. To learn more about the ranch real estate market or our ranch marketing process, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter on our website at mirranchgroup.com or give us a call at 303-623-4545. See you next time.